Dr. Amara Jenkins walked through the sliding doors of Memorial Hospital at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her shift started. She always came early to review patient files and prepare herself mentally for the day ahead. The morning air was cool against her face as she entered the building, her white coat crisp and her stethoscope hanging around her neck. At 35, Dr. Jenkins had already made a name for herself in the medical community. She specialized in rare autoimmune disorders and had published several important papers on innovative treatment methods. Her colleagues respected her calm demeanor and sharp mind, often seeking her opinion on difficult cases. Morning, Dr. Jenkins called out Nurse Rodriguez from behind the reception desk. "We got a busy one today. 3 new admissions overnight." Dr. Jenkins smiled and waved as she headed to the doctor's lounge to drop off her bag. She quickly checked her appearance in the mirror, adjusting her neat braids and straightening her name badge. Even after 10 years at Memorial, she still felt the need to look perfectly professional at all times. After reviewing the new cases, she decided to start with room 304. The patient, Eleanor Whitman, had been admitted with symptoms that caught Dr. Jenkins' attention immediately: fever, joint pain, skin rash, and increasing confusion, all signs that pointed to something more complex than the initial diagnosis suggested. Dr. Jenkins knocked gently on the door before entering. Inside, a thin elderly woman with silver hair lay propped up against white pillows. A younger woman, likely her daughter, sat in a chair beside the bed. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman. I'm Dr. Jenkins, the specialist who will be overseeing your care," she said with a warm smile. Eleanor Whitman's eyes widened as she looked at Dr. Jenkins. Her mouth tightened into a thin line, and she turned to her daughter with clear displeasure. "What is this?" Eleanor said loudly, not addressing Dr. Jenkins directly. "I asked for a real doctor." The daughter's face flushed red with embarrassment. "Mom, please." "No," Eleanor interrupted. "I want an American doctor, someone I can trust." Dr. Jenkins had heard these words before. Despite her credentials and years of experience, some patients still saw only her skin color. She kept her expression neutral, though her heart pounded harder in her chest. "Mrs. Whitman, I assure you I'm fully qualified to." "I don't care what you say. I want someone else," Eleanor insisted, looking past Dr. Jenkins to the door as if expecting a different doctor to appear. Nurse Rodriguez, who had entered behind Dr. Jenkins with a medication cart, looked stunned. "Mrs. Whitman, Dr. Jenkins is one of our top specialists," she. "I said no," Eleanor snapped. Her face had grown more flushed, and the monitors showed her heart rate increasing. "Get me another doctor, a proper one." Dr. Jenkins took a deep breath. She had learned over the years not to take such reactions personally, though each one still stung. More importantly, she noticed something in Eleanor's blood work report that concerned her deeply, something other doctors might miss. "That's your right, Mrs. Whitman," Dr. Jenkins said calmly. "I'll have another physician assigned to your case." As she turned to leave, she made a mental note to follow this case carefully. The pattern of symptoms, combined with the unusual lab results, pointed to a rare condition she had studied extensively. Eleanor Whitman might not want her help, but Dr. Jenkins suspected she might be the only one who could properly diagnose what was happening. Outside the room, Dr. Jenkins paused to make notes in the patient's file, her hands steady despite the encounter. This wasn't the first time she had faced prejudice, and it wouldn't be the last. But as a doctor, her duty remained the same, to help those in need, even when they didn't want to be helped by someone who looked like her. Dr. Michael Chen stood at Eleanor Whitman's bedside, reviewing her chart with a furrowed brow. It had been 24 hours since Dr. Jenkins stepped away from the case, and Eleanor's condition was getting worse, not better. "The fever isn't responding to antibiotics," he said to Nurse Rodriguez, "and these new blood tests are strange." Eleanor lay against the pillows, her skin now showing an unusual mottled pattern that had spread from her arms to her chest. Her breathing came in short, labored gasps, and her daughter Melissa hadn't left her side. "What about the rash?" Melissa asked, gently holding her mother's hand. "It's spreading." Dr. Chen nodded, concern evident in his eyes. "We're running more tests. The rheumatology panel should give us better answers." What he didn't say was that he was puzzled. The symptoms didn't fit neatly into any common diagnosis. He had already consulted with 2 other doctors, and neither could offer a clear explanation. Meanwhile, Dr. Jenkins sat in the hospital cafeteria, looking through Eleanor's file on her tablet. Though she had been removed from the case officially, she couldn't stop thinking about those test results. There was something familiar about the pattern, something she had seen only a few times before. "Still checking on the Whitman case?" asked Dr. Taylor, the chief of medicine, sitting down across from her with a coffee. Dr. Jenkins nodded. "There's something about her symptoms that reminds me of a case study I worked on during my fellowship. The combination of the rash pattern, fever resistance, and these unusual protein markers. You think it's serious?" "I think it could be Lundberg-Nakamura syndrome," she said quietly. "It's extremely rare. Only about 50 documented cases worldwide." Dr. Taylor's eyebrows shot up. "That's autoimmune, isn't it?" "Yes, and if I'm right, the standard treatment they're giving her could actually make things worse." Back in room 304, the monitors began beeping rapidly. Eleanor's temperature had spiked to 104, and her blood pressure was dropping. Nurses rushed in as Melissa backed against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" she cried. Dr. Chen worked quickly, ordering new medications and calling for additional assistance. "She's having a severe reaction to something. We need to stabilize her." As the team worked, Dr. Jenkins received an alert on her phone about the emergency in room 304. Without thinking, she headed toward the floor, stopping just outside the room where she could see the commotion inside. Nurse Rodriguez noticed her and stepped out into the hallway. "It's bad," she said simply. "Nothing they're doing is working." Dr. Jenkins bit her lip. "I think I know what it might be, but she doesn't want you as her doctor," Nurse Rodriguez finished. At that moment, Melissa emerged from the room, tears streaming down her face. She spotted Dr. Jenkins and, to the doctor's surprise, headed straight for her. "You're Dr. Jenkins, aren't you? The one my mother refused to see." Dr. Jenkins nodded carefully. "Yes, I am." Dr. Chen mentioned they're having trouble diagnosing her. He said there was a specialist who might have had some ideas. Melissa's eyes were pleading. "Was that you?" Dr. Jenkins hesitated only briefly. "I believe your mother might have a very rare condition. It's called Lundberg-Nakamura syndrome." "Can it be treated?" "Yes, but the approach is very different from standard protocols, and we need to act quickly." Inside the room, the monitors continued to sound alarms as Eleanor's condition deteriorated. Melissa looked back at her mother, then at Dr. Jenkins again. "I don't care what my mother said before. Please, if you can help her." Dr. Jenkins knew the ethical complications. The patient had explicitly rejected her care. But now, Eleanor Whitman's life hung in the balance, and she might be the only doctor at Memorial who could recognize what was happening. "Let me speak with Dr. Chen," Dr. Jenkins said finally. "I can consult on the case, even if I'm not the primary physician." As she prepared to enter the room, Dr. Jenkins steeled herself. She would face whatever prejudice came her way, because right now, saving Eleanor's life was all that mattered, whether Eleanor wanted her help or not. Dr. Jenkins stood outside the hospital ethics committee room, waiting for her turn to speak. Inside, doctors, administrators, and legal staff debated what to do about Eleanor Whitman's case. The situation presented a complex ethical dilemma. A patient had clearly refused treatment from a specific doctor based on racial prejudice, but that same doctor might be the only one who could save her life. "Dr. Jenkins," the committee secretary opened the door. "They're ready for you now." She entered the room and faced the 8 committee members seated around a large table. Dr. Taylor, as chief of medicine, nodded to her respectfully. "Dr. Jenkins, we understand you believe Mrs. Whitman has Lundberg-Nakamura syndrome," he began. "Can you explain why you're so confident in this diagnosis when other physicians haven't identified it?" Dr. Jenkins took a deep breath. "During my fellowship at Johns Hopkins, I worked directly with Dr. Nakamura on 3 cases. The pattern of symptoms Mrs. Whitman is showing matches exactly: the distinctive rash pattern, the resistance to standard treatments, and most importantly, the specific combination of markers in her blood work that other tests might miss." On the other side of the hospital, Melissa sat beside her mother's bed. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness, her condition worsening by the hour. The treatments Dr. Chen had tried were having no effect. "Mom," Melissa said softly, holding her mother's hand. I need to talk to you about something important. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. What is it? Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. The doctors are having trouble figuring out what's wrong with you. Melissa paused, gathering her courage. But there's one doctor who might know. She's the specialist in this kind of thing. Eleanor's expression changed slightly. Not that black woman? Melissa flinched at her mother's words. Mom, I need to ask you something. Why did you refuse to let Dr. Jenkins treat you? Eleanor turned her face away. You wouldn't understand. When I was young. What, Mom? What happened? Your grandfather died after a surgery. The doctor was... Eleanor trailed off, but Melissa understood. So you've spent your whole life blaming an entire race of people for what happened to Grandpa. Melissa couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Mom, that was 50 years ago, and it wasn't because of the doctor's race that Grandpa died. Back in the ethics committee room, the discussion had grown heated. We can't force a doctor on a patient who has explicitly refused their care, argued Dr. Richards, the hospital's legal advisor. The liability would be enormous. But if we don't let Dr. Jenkins treat her, Mrs. Whitman could die, countered Dr. Williams, head of internal medicine. Doesn't our duty to save lives outweigh her prejudice? Dr. Jenkins listened quietly until asked for her opinion. I believe we should talk to Mrs. Whitman again, present her with the facts, and let her make an informed choice. If she still refuses my care after understanding the full situation, then we should respect that decision. Meanwhile, Melissa continued her difficult conversation with Eleanor. Mom, I found out more about Dr. Jenkins. She's published papers on this exact condition they think you might have. She's literally written the book on treating it. Melissa squeezed her mother's hand. Would you rather hold on to your prejudice or hold on to your life? Eleanor remained silent for a long moment. The beeping of monitors filled the room. I'm scared, Melissa, she finally admitted. I'm scared of dying, but I'm also scared of changing the way I've thought my whole life. I know, Mom. Change is hard, but sometimes it's necessary. As if on cue, Dr. Chen entered the room, looking tired and concerned. Mrs. Whitman, we need to talk about your treatment options. The ethics committee is meeting right now to discuss your case. He hesitated, then continued. Dr. Jenkins believes she knows what's causing your symptoms. She's seen this condition before. Eleanor closed her eyes, her inner conflict visible on her face. Decades of ingrained prejudice battled against the will to survive. Melissa waited anxiously for her mother's response, knowing that Eleanor's next words might determine whether she lived or died. The monitors in Eleanor's room screamed with urgent alarms. Her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, and her oxygen levels were falling rapidly. Dr. Chen rushed in with a team of nurses, moving with practiced urgency. She's going into shock, he announced, his voice steady despite the crisis. Start vasopressors and get a central line in now. Melissa was ushered to the corner of the room, watching in horror as her mother's body began to fail. The medical team worked frantically, inserting IVs and administering emergency medications. What's happening? Melissa cried out. She was just talking to me a few minutes ago. Dr. Chen glanced at her while continuing his work. This is characteristic of the syndrome Dr. Jenkins suspected. The immune system suddenly attacks multiple organs at once. Outside in the hallway, Dr. Jenkins received an urgent page about Eleanor's deteriorating condition. The ethics committee meeting had ended without a clear resolution, but there was no time left for debate. She hurried toward Eleanor's room, her heart pounding with each step. When she arrived, she found controlled chaos. The crash team was already there, with Dr. Chen directing treatment. He spotted her in the doorway and motioned her in. Dr. Jenkins, we need your expertise. Now. Despite the earlier rejection, Dr. Jenkins didn't hesitate. She stepped to Eleanor's bedside and quickly assessed the situation. The rash had spread dramatically, now covering most of Eleanor's body. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Has anyone given her corticosteroids? Dr. Jenkins asked. Yes, standard dose, replied a nurse. We need to triple it, and add cyclophosphamide immediately, Dr. Jenkins said, her voice calm but firm. And we need to start plasmapheresis right away. Dr. Chen looked hesitant. Plasmapheresis? That's an aggressive approach. It's the only thing that worked in the cases I studied with Dr. Nakamura, Dr. Jenkins explained. This syndrome creates specific antibodies that need to be filtered out of her blood. Without plasmapheresis, the medications won't work fast enough. Melissa stepped forward from her corner. Do whatever Dr. Jenkins says, she insisted. Please. Dr. Chen nodded and began giving orders to prepare for the procedure. Dr. Jenkins turned to Melissa, speaking gently but honestly. I need to be clear. Your mother is extremely sick. Even with the right treatment, recovery isn't guaranteed. Melissa wiped tears from her face. I understand. But at least now she has a chance. As the team prepared Eleanor for plasmapheresis, Dr. Jenkins noticed the elderly woman's eyes flutter open. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Eleanor's eyes widened with recognition, and Dr. Jenkins prepared herself for another rejection. Instead, Eleanor weakly raised her hand. Dr. Jenkins hesitated, then stepped closer. You're the specialist? Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, Mrs. Whitman, I'm here to help you. Eleanor seemed to struggle with herself, decades of prejudice fighting against the desperate will to live. Finally, she gave a small nod. Please, help me. It wasn't an apology or a change of heart, just a desperate plea from a frightened woman. But it was enough for Dr. Jenkins to proceed with clear consent. The next hour was intense as the plasmapheresis machine was connected to Eleanor's body. The process would filter her blood, removing the harmful antibodies attacking her organs. Dr. Jenkins stayed by her side, monitoring every change in her condition. The procedure will take several hours, Dr. Jenkins explained to Melissa. During that time, we'll see if her body begins to respond. Melissa looked exhausted but grateful. Thank you for helping her despite everything. Dr. Jenkins simply nodded. She had become a doctor to save lives, regardless of who those lives belonged to. As she checked Eleanor's vitals again, she thought about all the barriers she had faced in her career, the subtle and not-so-subtle prejudices, the extra effort needed to prove herself, the patients who looked at her with doubt or outright rejection. None of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was using her knowledge to fight for Eleanor's life, even if Eleanor had never fought for her dignity or respect. The first hour of treatment passed with no improvement. Eleanor remained critical, hovering between life and death as the machine quietly hummed, cleansing her blood of the antibodies that were killing her. 3 hours into the plasmapheresis treatment, Dr. Jenkins noticed the first positive sign. Eleanor's oxygen levels had stabilized, and her blood pressure was slowly rising. It wasn't a dramatic improvement, but it suggested the treatment might be working. The latest blood tests show the antibody levels are decreasing. Dr. Jenkins told Dr. Chen as they reviewed the results at the nurse's station. It's a good start, but we're not out of the woods yet. Melissa had stepped out to get coffee, her first break from her mother's bedside in hours. When she returned, she found Dr. Jenkins checking Eleanor's rash. Is there any change? Melissa asked, the exhaustion evident in her voice. The rash isn't spreading anymore, Dr. Jenkins replied. That's usually our first indication the treatment is working. Melissa set her coffee down and sank into the chair beside the bed. Can I ask you something, Dr. Jenkins? Of course. How are you able to care for her so, professionally, after what she said to you? Melissa's eyes were filled with a mixture of admiration and shame. Dr. Jenkins adjusted Eleanor's IV line before answering. When I took the Hippocratic Oath, there weren't any exceptions listed. I didn't promise to only help kind people or people who look like me. Still, it must be hard. Dr. Jenkins smiled slightly. Medicine itself is hard. Being black in medicine adds another layer of difficulty. But I learned long ago that I couldn't let other people's prejudices stop me from doing what I love. Their conversation was interrupted when Eleanor stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She looked confused, taking in the medical equipment around her. What's happening? She asked weakly. You're getting a special treatment, Mom, Melissa explained. Dr. Jenkins diagnosed what was wrong with you. It's a rare condition called Lundberg-Nakamura syndrome. Eleanor's gaze shifted to Dr. Jenkins, who was checking the plasmapheresis machine. There was a moment of tension as the two women looked at each other. The treatment seems to be working, Dr. Jenkins said professionally. Your vital signs are improving, and the rash has stopped spreading. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She watched as Dr. Jenkins methodically checked her IV lines and examined the rash on her arms. "Where did you learn about this disease?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I worked with Dr. Nakamura himself during my fellowship," Dr. Jenkins explained. "He's one of the doctors who first identified this syndrome. We studied several cases together, and I co-authored a paper on the treatment protocol we're using now." A nurse entered with a tablet, showing Dr. Jenkins' new test results. Dr. Jenkins studied them carefully, her face breaking into a smile. "Your kidney and liver functions are improving," she told Eleanor. "The treatment is definitely working." As the nurse left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Melissa looked between her mother and the doctor, sensing the unspoken tension. "I need to check on another patient," Dr. Jenkins said after a moment. "I'll be back in an hour to assess your progress." As she turned to leave, Eleanor's voice stopped her. "Why did you help me?" The question was direct, without pretense. Dr. Jenkins turned back, meeting Eleanor's gaze steadily. "Because you needed help, and I could provide it. Even after I refused to let you treat me?" "Yes." Eleanor looked away first, her eyes filling with tears she seemed determined not to shed. "I don't understand people like you." Dr. Jenkins paused at the door. "People like doctors." The question hung in the air, highlighting the prejudice in Eleanor's words. Eleanor didn't answer, but her expression showed she understood the point. "You should rest now," Dr. Jenkins said kindly. "The treatment will continue for another few hours, and then we'll reassess." After Dr. Jenkins left, Melissa took her mother's hand. "She saved your life, Mom." Eleanor closed her eyes, tears finally escaping down her wrinkled cheeks. "I know," she whispered. And for the first time, those tears seemed to be not just from physical pain, but from something deeper, the uncomfortable recognition of her own misplaced hatred. By the next morning, Eleanor's condition had improved significantly. The plasmapheresis treatment had removed enough of the harmful antibodies from her bloodstream to allow the medications to work effectively. Her fever had dropped, the rash was fading, and her vital signs had stabilized. Dr. Jenkins had ordered the treatment to continue for another full day to ensure all the dangerous antibodies were filtered out. Dr. Chen entered Eleanor's room for morning rounds, surprised to find her sitting up and eating a light breakfast. "You're looking much better today, Mrs. Whitman," he said, checking her chart. Dr. Jenkins' diagnosis was spot on. Eleanor nodded slightly but didn't respond. Melissa, who had spent the night in a chair beside the bed, stretched and smiled at Dr. Chen. "When is Dr. Jenkins coming?" Melissa asked. "She should be here soon." She wanted to review the latest blood work first. Eleanor put down her spoon and looked out the window. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hospital grounds. "I need to talk to her," she said quietly. Melissa raised her eyebrows in surprise. "About your treatment?" "About everything." Dr. Chen excused himself, promising to send Dr. Jenkins in when she arrived. After he left, Melissa moved closer to her mother's bed. "Mom, are you going to apologize to her?" Eleanor's face tightened. "I don't know what to say to her. How do you thank someone you treated so badly? How do you even begin to explain?" "Just be honest," Melissa suggested. "That's all anyone can ask." 20 minutes later, Dr. Jenkins entered the room. She wore her white coat as always, her stethoscope around her neck, and carried a tablet with Eleanor's test results. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman. You're looking much better today," she said, her voice professional but warm. "Your latest tests show the treatment is working exactly as we hoped." Eleanor watched as Dr. Jenkins examined her rash, now faded to a light pink rather than the angry red of days before. "When can I go home?" Eleanor asked. "Not for at least a week," Dr. Jenkins replied. "This syndrome requires careful monitoring, even as you improve. There's a risk of relapse if we don't complete the full course of treatment." Dr. Jenkins made notes on her tablet, explaining the next steps in Eleanor's recovery. As she finished, she moved toward the door. "Dr. Jenkins," Eleanor called out, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Could I talk to you for a minute? Alone?" Dr. Jenkins hesitated, then nodded. Melissa squeezed her mother's hand and left the room, closing the door behind her. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The only sounds were the soft beeping of monitors and the distant voices in the hospital hallway. I don't expect you to forgive me, Eleanor finally said, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her blanket. What I said to you when we first met. There's no excuse for it. Dr. Jenkins remained standing, her expression carefully neutral. You were raised in a different time, Mrs. Whitman. That's no excuse, Eleanor replied sharply. My generation likes to hide behind that, but the truth is, I chose to hold on to those beliefs. I chose to judge you before I knew anything about you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. And then you saved my life anyway. Dr. Jenkins moved closer to the bed. Mrs. Whitman, I didn't help you to teach you a lesson or to make you feel guilty. I helped you because that's my job. That's my calling. Why medicine? Eleanor asked suddenly. With all the prejudice you must face, why did you choose this career? Dr. Jenkins considered the question carefully. I became a doctor because I believe everyone deserves good health care, and because I was good at science, she added with a small smile. Very good, actually. The hint of pride in Dr. Jenkins' voice made Eleanor smile too, despite herself. My grandfather died after a surgery when I was 8, Eleanor said, the words coming out in a rush. The doctor was black. For years, my father blamed the doctor's race for what happened. He taught me to think the same way. She shook her head. It wasn't true, was it? Surgeries were riskier 50 years ago, Dr. Jenkins said gently. And without knowing the details, I can't say what happened. But no, a doctor's race has nothing to do with their skill or dedication. Eleanor nodded slowly, her face showing the difficult inner work of challenging beliefs held for a lifetime. I have a lot to think about, she said quietly. Yes, Dr. Jenkins agreed. And right now, you also need to rest. We can continue this conversation when you're stronger. 5 days had passed since Eleanor's crisis. The hospital room that had once been filled with tension and emergency equipment now felt almost peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, falling across the bed where Eleanor sat propped up against pillows, looking through a photo album Melissa had brought from home. Dr. Jenkins entered for her afternoon checkup, carrying a folder of test results. Good news, Mrs. Whitman. Your latest blood work shows no signs of the antibodies that were attacking your system. Eleanor closed the album and studied Dr. Jenkins' face. Over the past days, she had begun to see the woman behind the title, the slight dimple that appeared when she smiled, the intelligent eyes that missed nothing, the gentle hands that checked her pulse and examined her healing rash. Does that mean I'm cured? Eleanor asked. Dr. Jenkins pulled up a chair beside the bed. With this syndrome, we don't use the word cured. We say in remission. You'll need regular blood tests for the next year to make sure the antibodies don't return. Melissa, who had stepped out to make a phone call, returned to the room. Did I miss anything important? Mom's getting better, Dr. Jenkins replied with a smile, but she'll need follow-up care. Eleanor frowned slightly. Will you still be my doctor after I leave the hospital? The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning beyond the simple words. Dr. Jenkins took a moment before answering. I'd be happy to continue as your specialist, Mrs. Whitman, but only if you're comfortable with that arrangement. Eleanor nodded slowly. I would like that. Dr. Jenkins made a note in the chart. Then I'll schedule your first follow-up appointment for 2 weeks after discharge. As Dr. Jenkins continued explaining the next steps in treatment, a young medical student knocked and entered the room. Excuse me, Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Taylor is looking for you. There's a new admission with symptoms similar to Mrs. Whitman's case. Dr. Jenkins stood quickly. I'll be right there. She turned to Eleanor and Melissa. I'm sorry, but I need to check on this patient. We'll continue our discussion later. After Dr. Jenkins left, Melissa sat in the chair she had vacated. You've come a long way, Mom, not just with your health. Eleanor looked down at her hands, spotted with age and now marked with fading rash. I'm trying, she said quietly. It's not easy to change thoughts you've had your whole life. But you're doing it anyway, Melissa said, squeezing her mother's hand. Later that evening, as sunset painted the hospital room in shades of orange and gold, Dr. Jenkins returned. She looked tired but satisfied. How's the new patient? Eleanor asked. Responding well to treatment, Dr. Jenkins replied. We caught it early, thanks to what we learned from your case. Eleanor seemed surprised by this information. My case helped someone else. That's how medicine works, Dr. Jenkins explained, sitting down beside the bed. Each patient teaches us something that might help the next one. Your case was especially valuable because Lundberg-Nakamura syndrome is so rare. The data we gathered will contribute to research that might save many lives. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, processing this. I never thought about it that way, that something good could come from my illness. Dr. Jenkins smiled. Sometimes good comes from unexpected places. The deeper meaning behind her words wasn't lost on Eleanor. She reached out hesitantly and touched Dr. Jenkins' hand, the first time she had initiated contact. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for saving my life, but for giving me the chance to see things differently." Dr. Jenkins turned her palm upward, briefly holding Eleanor's hand in her own. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. Two women from different worlds, different generations, crossing a bridge that society had tried to convince them was uncrossable. "Tomorrow," Dr. Jenkins said, "we'll start preparing for your discharge. You're strong enough to continue recovery at home." Eleanor nodded, a mix of emotions crossing her face, relief at the progress of her health, anxiety about leaving the hospital's safety, and something new, a humble recognition of how close her prejudice had come to costing her life. 2 months after her discharge from the hospital, Eleanor Whitman sat in the waiting room of Dr. Jenkins' office for her follow-up appointment. The medical building was busy that morning, filled with patients of all ages and backgrounds. Eleanor watched them with new eyes, noticing details she might have overlooked before: a young mother comforting her crying child, an elderly man helping his wife with her oxygen tank, a teenager nervously filling out forms. "Mrs. Whitman," the nurse called her name. "Dr. Jenkins will see you now." Eleanor followed the nurse down the hallway, moving more slowly than before her illness but steadier than she had been in the hospital. The disease had taken its toll on her body, leaving her thinner and more fragile, but her mind remained sharp. Dr. Jenkins greeted her with a warm smile, rising from behind her desk as Eleanor entered the office. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman. How are you feeling today?" "Better every week," Eleanor replied, settling into the chair across from Dr. Jenkins. "The new medication doesn't make me as drowsy as the last one." Dr. Jenkins nodded, reviewing Eleanor's chart on her computer. "Your blood work looks excellent. The antibody levels remain normal, and your organ function has almost completely recovered." Eleanor watched as Dr. Jenkins made notes, struck again by the competence and care this woman had shown her, despite everything. "I brought something for you," Eleanor said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, wrapped package and placed it on the desk. Dr. Jenkins looked surprised. "You didn't need to bring me anything." "I wanted to," Eleanor insisted. "Please, open it." Dr. Jenkins carefully unwrapped the package to find a small silver picture frame. Inside was a photograph of Eleanor with her late husband, standing in front of their home some 30 years earlier. "My husband built that house with his own hands," Eleanor explained. "Everyone said it wouldn't last. The foundation wasn't right, the materials were cheap. But he knew what he was doing, even if others doubted him." She paused, her eyes meeting Dr. Jenkins. "It's still standing today." Dr. Jenkins understood the deeper meaning behind the gift. "Thank you," she said sincerely, placing the frame on her desk. "This means a lot to me." "I've been doing a lot of thinking since I got sick," Eleanor continued. "About the beliefs I've carried all these years, about the people I might have hurt." Her voice trembled slightly. "I can't change the past, but I can change what I do now." Dr. Jenkins nodded encouragingly. "That's all any of us can do." "Melissa tells me you're giving a talk at the community center next month," Eleanor said, "about recognizing the signs of rare diseases." "That's right. We're trying to raise awareness so people seek treatment earlier." Eleanor hesitated, then spoke with determination. "I'd like to come. Maybe I could even say a few words about my experience." Dr. Jenkins raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You'd be willing to share your story?" "Not just about the illness," Eleanor clarified. "About how I almost refused treatment from the one person who could help me because of prejudice." The last word came out with difficulty. "If my story helps even one person think differently or seek treatment they might otherwise avoid, then something good can come from my mistake." Dr. Jenkins was quiet for a moment, visibly moved by Eleanor's offer. "I think that would be very powerful." After completing the medical examination, Dr. Jenkins walked Eleanor to the waiting room. As they said goodbye, Eleanor noticed the photo of Dr. Jenkins' family on her badge lanyard. 3 generations smiling together at what looked like a graduation. Is that your family? Eleanor asked. Dr. Jenkins smiled, touching the photo briefly. Yes, my parents, my daughter, and me at her high school graduation last year. You have a beautiful family, Eleanor said simply. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins replied. Same time next month for your follow-up? Eleanor nodded. As she walked toward the exit, she passed a young black woman in the waiting room, nervously clutching a referral letter. Their eyes met briefly, and Eleanor smiled warmly. Dr. Jenkins is wonderful, she told the woman. You're in good hands. Outside, Melissa waited in the car to drive her mother home. How did it go? She asked as Eleanor settled into the passenger seat. Good, Eleanor replied, watching the medical building recede in the side mirror. I think I'm finally healing, in more ways than one.